What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Chris, Fedor, cleveland.com, Cavs beat reporter, and Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com columnist. And we're coming to you guys after the Cavs victory in Game 2 of the first round against the Toronto Raptors, 115-105. And guys, before we get into the breakdown of tonight's game, I thought the atmosphere in the arena was noteworthy enough. Obviously, we tune into games outside of the Cavaliers to be in the know when it comes to NBA as a whole. We saw San Antonio had everybody wearing their shirts. The Oklahoma City Thunder the same way. And the Cavs kind of fed off of that. They made an introductory video that made sure that Cavs fans were not only wearing their shirts, waving their rally towels, and making sure that they were involved in everything that was going on. Guys, obviously, we understand that Toronto is going to be raucous. The Cavs have to travel for Game 3 and Game 4. But what tone and what environment do you think was set for Cleveland in this Game 2 matchup before the game even was started?
Thought they got the assignment. I thought they got the message. For the most part, the fans wore the shirts and they created the stripe effect that they were looking for. They completely stole it from the San Antonio Spurs. It was so cool in San Antonio. The environment was awesome. Obviously, that team hasn't been in the playoffs in a little while. It was the first playoff game for Victor Wembanyama. So there are all those different things surrounding it. And I also wonder if coming into this series between the Cavs and the Raptors, this fan base was like, all right, let's get these guys out of here. Can we get to round 2 already, sort of thing? And I don't know that Game 1 necessarily had that playoff, the charged playoff atmosphere, but it did feel like tonight did. And it did feel like tonight the fans were into it. They were waving the towels. They were following the instructions. They were wearing the shirts. And it felt like a playoff environment. It felt like a true home court advantage. We know this. When stakes are high, when we're talking about sports in Cleveland, the fan base is going to rally around these teams. The fan base is going to do its part. The fan base is going to be loud and raucous and try and make it very, very difficult on the opponent. And I felt like tonight they did, in part because they were kind of bullied into it a little bit by the Cavs themselves.
I just don't understand being anti-shirt. We're just trying to create a cool atmosphere.
You got to show off your fit, Jimmy.
That's the goal inside the arena. Who are you showing off your fit for? You're not going to be on TV. You're sitting most of the game. You're wrinkling your fit is what you're doing. Just put on the free extra large t-shirt, make a bunch of noise. It's like it's the most like uncool, but I'm trying to be cool thing you could possibly do. It's doing way too much. If you watch anyone who watched that Spurs game on Sunday night, that atmosphere was incredible. Wemby, here's another thing. I'm not saying this has to happen, but I think one big difference with the Spurs is like Wemby really encourages it. Wemby, there's a great story in The Athletic by Jared Weiss earlier this year on how like Wemby made it his personal project to like start a European style fan club within the Spurs, and like he held auditions for super fans, and they started this tradition where like, player of the game will bang the drum at the end of the game. It's a little light the beamish. Like the Spurs are having a lot of fun right now, and those traditions are only going to get cooler as they advance deeper in the playoffs. And God only knows what kind of a success they'll experience over the next 5 years with Wemby. Like that, I think that matters a lot. And if like Donovan or James, they should, no, this is not their responsibility, but I do think it would help to have someone within the organization, not just like the Jumbotron and Ahmad Crump, who's awesome, shaming people. If someone that the fans really cared about scolded them to put the shirts on, even if like someone made like a Jumbotron video and Donovan's face comes on the Jumbotron video and says, hey, don't be too cool for a free t-shirt, like frame it that way too, I think that would go a long way.
And I think we're all trying to remember that this is a game. You're supposed to have fun. And I think that also feeds into the players, right? And maybe it helped them out a little bit because as we saw, the Cavs' big three or the Cavs three highest scorers for tonight combined for 83 of their 115 points on the night. And we understand how huge this is for this Cleveland Cavaliers roster as they continue to try and make a statement with their offensive firepower. This was just the fourth time in Cavs playoff history that three players tallied 25 points or more. Donovan Mitchell, 30 points. James Harden, 28 points. Evan Mobley, 25 points. And obviously, we continuously talked about the dynamic duo of Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, how they unlock one another. It was seemingly perfect in fluidity when it came to setting small on small screens to open each other up or spacing the floor so that James Harden could go ISO and do what he does at the 3-point range with his patented step back. What did you guys make of the performance from these three players, especially in a game two, that Kenny Atkinson said they threw the whole kitchen sink at them and it was going to be a rock fight?
I'll just say in response to what you said, yes, maybe the fans did help. Maybe the fans did spur on the Cavs. I don't think the Cavs need help against the Toronto Raptors. I think they have all the answers to this test, and I don't think I don't think they can reach the level that they need to reach to be competitive in this series. I think Toronto is cooked with a capital C, all bold letters. If you watch Brandon Ingram after the game, he looks completely befuddled and defeated. He looks like a guy who has no idea how he's supposed to score consistently against Dean Wade, against Jared Allen, against Evan Mobley. Toronto's coach is already talking about the free throw disparity. He's talking about the Cavs. The Cavs, a team that has been labeled soft, a team that has been labeled regular season paper tigers, a team that has been labeled overrated. You've got the Toronto Raptors coach talking about the Cavs being physical and playing with that level of physicality on a possession-to-possession basis. That's the view from the Toronto Raptors. That's a team that doesn't have a lot of stuff going for them. Look, they did try a bunch of stuff, and that's the thing. They changed up their lineup to start the second half. Jakob Poeltl, go sit down. You don't belong in this series. We'll try rookie Colin Murray-Boyles. All right, we're going to try Scotty Barnes on Evan Mobley to start. No, we're going to put Scotty on James Harden. All right, we're going to try Scotty on Donovan Mitchell. They're trying things. They're changing up their coverages defensively. They're running their offense through. It started with Brandon Ingram, and then he was awful at the beginning of the game. So then they changed, and they started running their offense through Scotty Barnes. But it's like the Cavs are dictating terms of engagement right now. The Cavs are forcing the Toronto Raptors to make all of the adjustments, and that's a really, really good place to be for the Cavs. And it's like, what do you do if you're Toronto? Yes, James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley are going to continue to dominate in this series because Toronto only has one Scotty Barnes. Theoretically, Toronto would want Scotty Barnes to guard James Harden. Theoretically, Toronto would want Scotty Barnes to guard Donovan Mitchell. Theoretically, Toronto would want Scotty Barnes to guard Evan Mobley. He can only guard one of them on a possession-to-possession basis. So then you have to ask RJ Barrett to guard Donovan Mitchell or James Harden. That's not working. You have to ask Brandon Ingram to guard Donovan Mitchell or James Harden. That's not working. So they're trying these different things, but sometimes you just don't have answers. Sometimes you have to take the best of all the bad answers in front of you. And that's kind of where the Raptors are right now. So yeah, Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, Evan Mobley, they've been great in the first two games. And there's no reason to think that they're not going to be great as this series shifts to Toronto because they just don't have enough capable defenders to deal with everything that the Cavs can do on the offensive end of the floor. It was one of the questions coming into the series, and it continues to be one of the questions. And the answer is they don't have enough quality defenders because Scotty Barnes is only one guy, and he can only guard one guy. And Scotty's held up at various points in this series. Scotty's made the Cavs work. Whoever it is that he's guarding has made the Cavs work as best as he possibly can. But again, he can only guard one of those guys, and the Cavs just have too much offensive weaponry.
I was thinking about what you said about they're asking Brandon Ingram to guard guys. I think the Cavs are asking Brandon Ingram to guard guys. They're just saying, oh, Brandon Ingram's over there. Why don't we have your guy come up here? Brandon Ingram just had a terrible, terrible night. at both ends. He's out here getting roughed up by the softy Cavs. Goes to the other end and they got we're not done with you. You don't just get to take a beat on the other end and think about all the shots you're missing. You're gonna switch on to James Harden. You're gonna be grasping at air. Or you're gonna switch on to Donovan Mitchell. He's just gonna blow right by you. What we're seeing with the Brandon Ingram stuff, there's a difference between all-stars and superstars. Cavs have 2 superstars. The Raptors have 2 all-stars. And Scotty Barnes might be able to get to that place one day where he's like a role player superstar, where he can swing the outcome of a series with his defense and his ability to influence pace and his passing and breaking defenses down, all that sort of stuff. He can't just call up a guy, hey, you set a screen here, I score now. Brandon Ingram is like the Raptors' best version of that guy, but he's not doing it for the last 3 halves of this series. The Raptors got their 3-point regression from the Cavs tonight. Now, they also regressed with 3-point range. They got their transition mojo back. They also committed 22 turnovers. That's a lot.
They got some bench scoring.
They got some useful Scotty stuff. At times, they were just like having Scotty rush around like a banshee, just like at anyone, just to try to get the ball out of some of the big time guys' hands. And there was some reason to that. The Cavs role players were pretty rough for the most part tonight. Like, you checked a lot of boxes that the Raptors are looking for. Still, the Cavs never trailed. They never trailed in the game for the first 2 games of the series. There's 96 minutes in 2 games. Cavs have led for 89 and some change. Like, dominance. Complete and utter dominance. We have these 3 guys, and you guys don't. That's what it comes down to.
And just think about the margin for error. That's the other thing that stands out to me. And the constant pressure that the Cavs have put on the Raptors. There were times that the Raptors were trying to make a run. They had it in single digits. And then they had multiple untimely turnovers or empty possessions. And it's like those are the things that the Raptors can't afford. Whereas the Cavs can play it down to the ticking seconds on the shot clock. And then Donovan can just pull something out of his butt. Or James Harden can just pull something out of his butt. Like, the Raptors don't have the ability to do that. They're trying to make these passes that they have no business making. They're trying to play outside of themselves. They're trying to do all these different things that they can possibly do. And some of those things are uncharacteristic. But that's because they're trying so hard to make these runs and come up with these answers and withstand the relentless pressure of the Cavs and try to swing the margin for error as best as they possibly can. And it's just like these little mistakes that they're making at the wrong time. And all of a sudden, it goes from a 6-point game to the Cavs are up by 16 again in the snap of a finger in like 90 seconds. And that's deflating for a team like the Raptors that's trying to come back, that feels like it's doing some positive things. And then you look up at the scoreboard and you're like, oh my God, we're down 16 again. Oh my God, we haven't led once all game. What do we have to do? What do we have to do to deal with these guys? And, at times it's very similar to how the Cavs looked when they were playing against the Pacers. Where they're like, what do we do against these guys? We just don't have the answers for what this series requires. And it's flipped. And now the answers are the ones that the Raptors are trying to come up with, and they just don't have.
It was telling to me that Kenny Atkinson would go as far as comparing Donovan Mitchell's maturity and calmness to Michael Jordan's ability to understand the moment, right? Obviously, in part with playing alongside James Harden and having these different options to create and all these things is extremely important. But Donovan Mitchell meeting the moment has not been new, right? He came into tonight's game as the 6th highest points per game in playoff history. And understanding that with James Harden, and we kind of saw this with the Cavs in regular season, sometimes you don't necessarily, in Scotty Barnes' case, you don't necessarily trust the other defenders around you to help or to figure it out against a James Harden or a Donovan Mitchell or whoever it may be, even Evan Mobley in some cases when Scotty Barnes was off the ball. And Scotty Barnes was kind of found himself out of position or in no man's land because he's like, Do I guard my player? Do I help? What do I do? And in those little instances, James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley were able to find the crevices, find the windows, and make the right read. Conversely, I think it showed itself on the defensive end of the floor. Jimmy, you mentioned it. 22 turnovers is a season high for the Toronto Raptors this year. And also, we kind of touched on it as well. Brandon Ingram was horrid. Brandon Ingram was 3 of 15 from the field. That's 20%. He had 7 points. He was a minus 15 on the floor. And as Donovan Mitchell and James Harden were leaving their post game press conference, they were like, I don't care what you guys do with the rest of the night, but somebody's got to give credit to Dean Wade because of the performance he's been able to put on. And again, we had this conversation after game one. Sure, Dean Wade had 3 points. He was a plus 14 on the floor. He had 2 steals. He had 5 rebounds. He was someone that was impacting winning because of what he does on the defensive end of the floor. And it's kind of connective, right? Whether that's Jared Allen and Evan Mobley behind him, whether that's Dean Wade walling up, whether that's Sam Merrill and Max Strus fighting for their proverbial lives because they're bodying up and just being available. That then allows James Harden to use his IQ, get into the passing lane. Same way with Donovan Mitchell. James Harden walked away with 5 steals tonight, guys. It felt like the Cavs, as much as we had our concerns about the defense in general coming into the postseason, this felt as connected as it's been all year.
Yes. And it started with Dean Wade. Dean Wade is the one who was given at the beginning of the series the toughest assignment. Brandon Ingram's the #1 name on Cleveland's scouting report. As Kenny Atkinson told me in the hallway after the game, Brandon Ingram, they decided as they were breaking down film that he was the head of the snake, not Scotty Barnes. He was the guy that they needed to focus on most coming into the series, and that's no slight on Scotty. But BI is a guy who has a playoff background. BI is a guy who has turned into one of the more prolific scorers in the NBA. He makes difficult shots. He's the one guy for Toronto that can consistently create offense, potentially. And Dean Wade has completely neutralized him to the point where Brandon Ingram's like arguing with his coach about what role he's supposed to have, how they're using him within the offense, the number of shots that he was going to get. Everybody knew coming off of what happened in game one, where Ingram got one shot attempt in the second half. Everybody knew that he was going to get force-fed the basketball early on in the game. And they did. Toronto tried to run the offense through it. Toronto made sure that he got the first shot offensively. Then he got another touch. Then he got another touch. Then he got another touch. And then Toronto was like, well, this isn't working for us. Why are we trying to run our offense through a guy who is going up against the best perimeter defender on the other team? Maybe we should start looking at attacking Donovan Mitchell. Maybe we should start looking at attacking, some of these other lesser defenders than Dean Wade. But that takes Toronto out of what they ultimately want to do. And Toronto doesn't have a lot of other guys that are capable of doing that, handling that kind of offensive role, being that kind of offensive fulcrum. So Dean Wade has completely disrupted what Toronto came into the series wanting to do, and an advantage that Toronto thought it was going to have with Brandon Ingram. That was the guy that they traded for last year. He is their leading scorer. He is their leading generator of consistent quality half-court offense. That's his role. That's his responsibility. That's why he's in Toronto. And Dean Wade has not allowed it to happen. Dean Wade has been great. If you want to grade somebody through the first 2 games of the series, Dean Wade gets an A+. Because he has done the thing that the Cavs have needed from the very beginning of this series to take the life out of the Toronto Raptors. And it's cut off the head of the snake. Brandon Ingram was 3 of 15. He started 0 for 6. He was tossing up some ill-advised shots just because he was finally touching the ball with a little bit of space. So he's like, I got to get this up. It's just the relentless pressure that Dean has put on Brandon Ingram. And look, this could change in game 3. Ingram could make some more shots. Dean may not be as good in game 3 or game 4. These things happen. It's very, very difficult to limit a prolific scorer over the course of an entire series. But in the first 2 games, that's exactly what Dean Wade has done, and you can tell the effect that it's having on the Raptors. The Raptors' offense tonight had an offensive rating of like 104. They have yet in this series to reach the 115 mark. And what do we say? Coming into this series, if the Raptors are going to have a fighting chance, they better find a way to score 115, at least 115 again. They haven't done it yet. They haven't done it yet because their leading scorer um, cannot get comfortable because their leading scorer looks completely defeated.
That was literally the difference tonight. If Brandon Ingram has a Brandon Ingram type night, this is a game that could go into crunch time, and then we'll see, right? Like who makes the shots. I know who I'm betting on to make the shots between these teams at the end of the game. Donovan and James were left and right just hitting the wow, the jaw droppers, the throw your hands up in the air if you're Toronto, and you can't believe that some of these shots are going in. But that's who they are. That's who they are. So Dean Wade, I think even more so tonight than in game one, because game one, the Cavs won that game a bunch of different ways. The Cavs won this game because Dean Wade, on a night where Toronto was hanging around and fighting and doing some good stuff, Dean Wade took Toronto's best player completely out of the game. And look, I understand why Cavs fans get frustrated with Dean. They will get frustrated with him again. Frankly, I don't understand. Like, if I'm Toronto and one of my biggest problems is Dean Wade, I'm trying to gear as many passes in Dean Wade's direction as I possibly can. Like, just make that guy take some shots. Easier said than done when Donovan Mitchell and James Harden are doing literally whatever they want out there. Understood. But like you need the help anyways, so leave Dean in the corner and let's see if he can make some shots. That would be one way to counteract that. But he's just the metrics are not always easy to understand if you're not big into the on-off numbers and the defensive plus minus or just regular box plus minus, all that sort of stuff. But those numbers bear out over and over and over and over again for a reason. Like the Cavs defense is just a lot better when Dean Wade's out there. The Cavs are a way better rebounding team when Dean Wade's out there. He does all of the stuff that doesn't draw your eye. We watch, like, how do most people watch the game, right? They watch the ball and they follow its flight. Dean Wade doesn't let you get the ball. Dean Wade doesn't let you get a shot off. That's like Dean Wade is the fact that Dean Wade is invisible is actually a credit to Dean Wade, right? Like it's counterintuitive, but the dude's really, really good, and he's really, really important to what this team is going to do going forward. Like this, you're seeing what he can do now. Better teams will find ways to highlight him on the offensive end, which could force the Cavs into some lineup decisions with him. The Raptors aren't good enough to do that, so they're just getting locked up.
I think it's interesting that you point that out. And Chris, you kind of alluded to it earlier, right? The essence of control and how the series has never really felt like it's been out of hand. Even when the first half of game one was back and forth, it always felt like the Cavs had confidence in where they were going. And we've talked about this throughout this season, like forcing teams to make decisions, dictating rather than being reactive. And I think it's super important to note that Jakob Poeltl played 10 minutes tonight because the Toronto Raptors were forced to go small. They were forced to go away from their one true center, their 7-footer that was supposed to be able to hold up against Evan Mobley, Jared Allen in the inside. But we understood the talent disadvantage that they were in. But the sheer size was going to be a question mark. And the physicality and all these things. I just think we're continuing to see that the Toronto Raptors do not have the answers. They cannot make enough adjustments or press the right buttons to get them in the position to be successful. And the only thing that I can really think of that they're hoping for is let's go back to Toronto, game 4, early game. Let's hope the Cavs have a great night out in between and see what happens from there. Because outside of that, guys, I know I called series in 5 before the series began. Chris, you said they'd be lucky to win a contest. It's looking more and more so like we're not going to a gentleman's sweep and that this could actually just be a sweep because of not only Kenny Atkinson pressing the right buttons, even though there are some questions that would be arisen against a different team. That's not who we're talking about right now. We're talking about the decisions being made against the Toronto Raptors and the opportunities being given that allow these guys to be prepared for when a bigger moment arises.
If Toronto's going to win a game in the series up in Canada, they're going to need the Cavs' help to do it. The Cavs are going to have to lose focus. They're going to have to get complacent. They're going to have some of those defensive breakdowns and miscommunications that were a staple of their defense during the regular season. They're going to need Donovan Mitchell to have an inefficient scoring night, or James Harden to be inefficient, or the Cavs to shoot below what they usually do. They're going to need help. Or the Toronto Raptors are going to have to play the game of the year. Just one of those games where everything goes right for them. A complete outlier, one side or the other. That's their chance. Because again, they tried stuff tonight. They did. And some of those things were smart. You were looking at their coach saying, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good move. And then you look up at the scoreboard and they're losing by 16. Or they're trailing by double digits for a majority of the second half. It became like the question became like, can they get this within 2 possessions? That's what you were wondering as they were making those runs, because that's how superior the Cavs have been in the first 2 games of the series. So I do think if they're going to be competitive, if they're going to win one of these next 2 games, they're going to need the Cavs to help them. The problem is, I don't think this is 10 years ago where the LeBron James led Cavs were like, we want to go back to Toronto. They literally said, we want to go back to Toronto. We love Toronto so much that we are just going to blow these games up in Canada so that we can get back here for game 6. But even those Cavs, they were like, okay, we're going to blow 2 games almost on purpose up in Toronto. But that's fine, because we're just going to come back and we're going to blow them out in game 5. Then we're going to go up in Canada and we're going to ruin their day. That's how the Cavs looked at the Raptors. Obviously, there is no DeMar DeRozan. There is no Kyle Lowry, no LeBron James, no Kyrie Irving. I don't think this team has that level of hubris. But that's the kind of thing that the Raptors are going to need. They need some help to try and win a game, just one game in this series. Because the other thing is, when you're a team like the Cavs and you go into this series as the 4 seed, it's up to the underdogs, the Raptors, to try and put doubt in the Cavs, try to make them think of some of those playoff ghosts, try and make them think of some of their past failures, maybe lose a little bit of confidence, maybe lose a little bit of composure. And maybe that's just not who they are anymore, because James Harden's here and because it's a different kind of group. But that's kind of Toronto's responsibility. And they haven't put any doubt in the Cavs at all. The Cavs are like, we're just going to do what we do, and we're going to do it better than you do what you do. What adjustment has Kenny Atkinson been forced to make? The only thing was down the stretch of this game, late in the 4th quarter, he went away from Jared Allen and he closed small. But that's not really that much of an adjustment, because the Cavs close small from time to time anyway, and Kenny kind of prefers doing that. So what have the Raptors done that the Cavs are looking at saying, oh boy, like we got to find a solution for this kind of thing? There's nothing that I've come up with to this point. So they haven't put any doubt in the mind of the Cavs at all. They haven't put any fear in the Cavs at all. The Cavs are a team that is very, very confident right now. And I think they're also very, very professional and businesslike. So I don't think they're going to go up to Toronto. Even James Harden, the things that he said in the post-game press conference lead me to believe that the Cavs are not going to lose focus. They are not going to get complacent, because they looked at this game and said, we could be a lot better. And some of the things that we did, like, we can't afford to do going into game 3 against Toronto. So having that kind of mindset, that kind of mentality, I don't think the Cavs are going up to Toronto for a vacation or go to watch the Guardians or something like that.
Yeah, his response to him and Donovan's shot making was more like we need to be better in early clock and not end up there.
Don't put ourselves in those situations.
I would say one thing that you can cling to for hope if you're Canadian. Shout hello to our Canadian listeners. I think a lot of the Cavs ghosts do live on the road. This iteration and it's different iteration with James Harden, but like other than those two absolute massacres in Miami last year in the first round, this group is, I believe, 2-8 on the road in the playoffs since Donovan got here. And some of their ugliest losses, that Indiana no-show last year, the Orlando series, basically every game, but the Donovan played hero ball for one of them and kept him in it, but the other two over in the first half. Terrible, terrible. I'm with Chris. I think this is a different fabric. This team is made from a different fabric. I think James Harden brings them a level of calm and organization in those moments when they have to stem a run. The Raptors haven't been on many runs, but like when they have to do that, they can get a good shot pretty easily. And frankly, James is, I think Donovan looks as good as he's ever looked in the playoffs, in large part because James is here. Like Donovan tonight, 30 points, 50% shooting for the second straight game. He's never done that before in a Cavs uniform. Well, technically, he did it. He did it once when like the last game of the Boston series, and then the next year was the next playoff game he played. So it depends on your definition of back to back is. But like in the same series, like traditionally, where like the the toll that it takes on your body to be Donovan Mitchell rolls over, that's never happened. It's not a coincidence. Like James is having a profound impact on a lot of players on this team, but like I think we're seeing a different Donovan. Also, the Raptors have no one who can guard him. It's gonna get harder. It's gonna get harder in the next round. The Pistons or Magic will have better defenders to throw at him. The Celtics or Knicks will have bigger wings to send his way. But I really think that it's a combination of Donovan being in the best shape of his career. He said that at the beginning of the season. And James Harden reminding him, like Donovan said after the game, like, sometimes I could just go stand in the corner and watch. Donovan never, in many ways, James Harden's arrival has clarified a lot of the previous Cavs runs for me. Because I remember last year in the Pacers series, we were like, so is this guy taking 30 shots because he's like getting outside of himself and he's like, along with the Cavs, he's sort of losing his identity? Or does he just not trust any of these dudes? I'm going with B. I'm going with B. I just don't think that he believed that he could relinquish control in a lot of those moments. And so he just ground himself to a nub, particularly in that Pacers series where he took 25 plus shots in 4 of the 5 games. And the 5th one was when they just got beat so badly that he didn't play. He didn't play his usual minutes load, right? Now that James Harden here, Donovan can like pick his spots. And that's what Kenny was talking about when he's talking about like the Michael Jordan maturity. It's that I can get any shot I want because I'm a superstar, but I need to pace myself. And when you pace yourself, it helps to have someone to throw the ball to. Okay, let me throw it to this guy, one of the other greatest creators of one-on-one offense that we've ever seen. And oh, Scotty Barnes is going to guard him. Now who's guarding Evan Mobley? We'll just throw that right down to him. He'll punish that. He'll punish that switch. Like the Cavs are in a very healthy place at the top of their hierarchy.
And speaking of last season's postseason, and also to Chris's point about being more methodical, more professional, more mature, as Kenny Atkinson continues to say, the Cavs understood that they swept their first round opponent last year. And that's not necessarily the bar that they're reaching for. They have their sights set higher. They have an understanding of who they want to be. And not to say that they're looking ahead, they're actually doing the opposite. They're focused on where they can improve so that when they get to the next round, they're going to be prepared and a better suited for whoever is in front of them. But that's their internal game plan, not necessarily going up against a certain matchup or a certain scheme or a certain style. And I think that part is what feels most professional, most methodical about this team is that they have the death scythe in hand and they're kind of just twirling it right now. We don't necessarily have to come and kill you all at once. We're gonna toy with you, but in a way that doesn't feel like we're playing games. We're going to be serious the entire time, take our time, learn from every mistake, learn from every win, and that's our way of showing that we can get where we want to. We can grow from wherever we are, from the baseline that we have set. And I think James Harden, Donovan Mitchell have already talked about it. They believe that this is one of their best, if not their best chance to win a championship. And that means Donovan Mitchell needs to get past the Eastern Conference semifinals. Best way to do that for you to pace your body to not necessarily be flushed out by the time that you get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Allow James Harden to take over a couple possessions, right? Even defensively. Kenny Atkinson mentioned James Harden knows when those key plays are coming. Learning that from him, learning when to go, learning when to take over, when to take a gamble, even defensively in the gaps, in the passing lanes, and then turning that into transition offense. I think Donovan Mitchell is not only finding out that he is the best version of himself, but he's learning how to be a better version because of who he's playing with. And I think that all encompasses what James Harden does. And although there's so many narratives about James Harden in the playoffs, James Harden's off the court activities, I haven't heard or seen any of those since he's come to Cleveland. Everybody in the locker room has consistently said James Harden is one of the best teammates. James Harden is one of the best leaders, one of the best communicators that we've played with. And I think Donovan Mitchell, we saw it in the game. Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, they scored a basket, and on the way to the bench during a timeout, they weren't congratulating one another. James Harden was illustrating a part of the game that Donovan Mitchell missed, where he could have had an easier read, an easier look, a better possession, even though they scored. They're not settling for the bare minimum. They're trying to be great. They're trying to improve their legacy. And I think they know that they have to do it together.
Well, the James Harden playoff thing is stupid, and it doesn't hold up right now because it's not apples to apples. This role that James Harden is in is very different than the one in the past, where he had to shoulder all of the responsibility, where he had to shoulder the load offensively. Now he can share that with Donovan. And yeah, there were times that James Harden was with Chris Paul. Chris Paul's not Donovan Mitchell. They're different kinds of guys. We already said it. Donovan Mitchell is an elite playoff scorer, one of the leading playoff scorers of all time in terms of average. So this is a different kind of role that James is in. This is a different kind of requirement for him that he's in. This is a different kind of pressure. It's all different. So this version of James Harden, like, he doesn't have to be Superman the way that he had to earlier in his career at different points. And if he wasn't Superman, then they lost. But, like, if he's not Superman for the Cavs, then Donovan's like, cool, man, I'll pick up your cape and I'll put it on myself, or Evan Mobley or Jared Allen. There's just more balance throughout this roster. There's more depth throughout this roster. So I think people are saying James Harden playoff failures, da-da-da-da-da. When has he been in this role? When has he been alongside this kind of elite scoring talent? So that to me is silly. The other thing that I would say is, like, yeah, you're right. In terms of Donovan, the other thing that he has going for him, who's he guarding in this series for Toronto? What kind of energy is he using on the defensive end of the floor? You know what I'm saying? Like, he looks at the end of these games, he looks fresh, he looks bouncy. It got to the fourth quarter and the Raptors got it within 6, and then Donovan's like, all right, time to take over. And he was fresh to do that. And yeah, part of it is James has taken some of that responsibility on the offensive end. James has allowed Donovan at times to just stand in the corner. James has allowed Donovan at times, and the way that Evan Mobley is dominating inside, at points, Donovan could just take possessions off completely. But on the other side of it, who's he guarding? What is Jamal Shed going to do? You know what I'm saying? So, like, he doesn't have to exert that kind of effort defensively in this particular series because the toughest assignment's going to Dean Wade. Dean Wade's handling that, and then Donovan just has to guard Jamal Shed or, like, Jacoby Walter? it might be a situation going into game 3 where Toronto's like, do we have to run offense through RJ Barrett to just make Donovan work harder? Do we have to run offense through RJ Barrett to make James Harden work harder? Because these guys look fresh and rested and very, very lively at the ends of these games. And I know it's playoffs and the intensity is up and the physicality is up and stuff like that. But Donovan doesn't have to work as hard on the offensive end of the floor to generate quality offense the way that he has in the past. Because as we said, there are levels to this. James Harden's a future Hall of Famer and Darius Garland's an all-star. The Cavs are getting 48 minutes of elite playoff level production from that position because they are making sure that one of Donovan Mitchell or James Harden is on the floor at all times. And that is not something that the Cavs have had in past playoff series.
What is Jamal Shed gonna do? Might be what we write on the tombstone of the Toronto Raptors this year in this series. Emmanuel, again, as we said after game 1, when you hear the words Emmanuel quickly is out, I'm like, okay, it's 2-0. That's how I feel. The Raptors, I don't think the Raptors could score enough with the Cavs with Emmanuel quickly. Take him out. You see what's happening. Colin Murray-Boyles shooting air balls open in the corner. Colin Murray-Boyles, by the way, I like Colin Murray-Boyles for a lot of different reasons. He can defend a lot of guys. He's super physical. I think eventually he can fit into a playoff setting. He's not a good shooter. The Cavs, and there's another guy at the Cavs can leave open. But because we're inscribing what is Jamal Shed going to do on the tombstone, I do think that's like an opportunity for us to hit a reality check here and say, like, there are tougher roads ahead. Basically, whoever comes out of that second round match, the 1-8 between the Pistons and the Magic, the Cavs can beat that team. I think, like we've been saying for the whole run up here, this is the side of the bracket you want to be on, but they will challenge you in different ways that the Raptors don't. Like Cade Cunningham is a level of player that just doesn't exist on the Toronto Raptors right now. Paolo Banchero, I would put Franz Wagner in a slight tier ahead of Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes and the like in the half court, right? They have better defenders that can match up with some of these guys. And to the Harden piece of it, he's in a different place now where he can be like more of a point guard type. The Cavs are going to need his cape eventually if they're going to max out their ceiling super far down the road. And he had, he's played with Kawhi, he's played with Joel Embiid. Those guys are eternally injured. I understand that. But he's had great co-stars before. And they've had moments together, and then it's time, and the other guy gets left. Where'd James go? That's still on the table. I do think the Cavs have a deeper roster. There was, in many of those cases, there was no third star. Brooklyn, we never really got to see what the KD, Kyrie, Harden pairing looked like. But you can be overconfident about this Raptors series. I think it's pretty much a wrap. Going forward, there are still questions that the Cavs have to answer. I feel better watching this Raptors series about what I believe their answer will be to those questions, but we can't know. We can't know until we get there. Quick sidebar, as we're talking about the depth of the Cavs roster here. Jared Allen and Jakob Poeltl like basically make the same amount of money. That's kind of crazy watching this series. The Raptors gave Jakob Poeltl an extension for like $30 million a year. That thing's aging like milk that's been left out in the sun right now.
I mean, it's one thing if your $12 million player gets played off the floor in a playoff series, you know what I mean? Or your $6 million player gets played off the floor in a playoff series. But when your $30 million player can't play in a series and you have to bench him in the second half for a rookie, mind you, then that's a really bad place to be. That's tough to overcome that sort of thing.
And to Chris's point and to Jimmy's point about the road to still come, Chris mentioned earlier that the physicality question, at least for this series, has been answered, right? Because the Cavs have imposed their will. And I kind of asked Darko before the game about their physicality, and Darko was like, they didn't out tough us. They didn't out physical us. Well, if it didn't happen in game 1, it certainly happened in game 2 because of the defensive end of the floor and how they took them out of the game. And I think it's just making them uncomfortable. Not necessarily the rebound bottle, but how the Cavs have used their bodies and been physical with the Toronto Raptors. And again, to my point that I'm getting to, Orlando and or the Detroit Pistons have players who can be physical back to a capability that the Toronto Raptors simply cannot. So, again, we'll get there, but that's down the road.
I even think coming into the series, guys, that we even said, hey, be careful. Be careful about conclusions beyond this series. And be careful when it comes to potentially being blinded by Toronto's incompetence and what that means for the Cavs and all of their stats. At the end of this series, the Cavs are going to be near the top of every single statistical category, basically. But that's not as much about them. Some of it's about them, of course, but that's not as much about them because the playoffs are about matchups. And coming into this series, it was always a bad matchup from the Toronto perspective. There was always a feeling inside the Cavs organization of, all right, good. We got Toronto instead of Atlanta. So, yes, this series in particular, we can talk about their dominance and we can talk about the fact that Toronto doesn't have answers. But yes, there is a truth here that as the playoffs go on, some of these other teams are going to have better answers than Jamal Shed. And some of these teams are going to have better answers than, hey, we need some 3-point shooting. So AJ Lawson, maybe, possibly, can you go out there? So yes, that is very, very true. And from that standpoint, there are going to be other answers that the Cavs have to come up with. And there are going to be other times where the Cavs have to make adjustments, or the Cavs are the ones that are reacting because something that they're doing isn't working as well as it did against the Toronto Raptors.
This time last year, Ty Jerome was a 16-game player, lighting up the Miami Heat. About 2 weeks later, Kenny Atkinson took him out of the rotation in Game 5 against the Pacers. Life comes at you fast in the playoffs. The Toronto Raptors are learning that in real time. First, but your general rule of thumb about who's winning the physicality battle, first team to start whining about foul calls or lack thereof loses. You lose. Darko talking about, oh, it's so interesting that Brandon Ingram shot 0 free throws tonight. You don't need to do that. You're like, that's insult to injury, self-inflicted wounds. He got locked up. It happens. I know coaches feel like they got to go to bat for their guys. Like, you don't have that kind of sway. Brandon Ingram's not the kind of guy who's going to get the benefit of the doubt on some of those calls because he's very slender. So if Brandon Ingram gets knocked off of his spot, the refs are going to be like, yeah, it makes sense to me because the other dude's probably stronger than him. I'm going to keep my whistle. The weight room's over there.
Yeah, and to just reiterate Chris's point, there will be similar questions that we came into this series with that will have to be answered again, no matter what series the Cavs get to. Because whether it's Detroit, Orlando, Boston, Atlanta, New York, who knows? Some of these same questions. I know Atlanta might be a stretch.
I had Detroit's a stretch, to be honest with you, but go on.
Let's get spicy.
Let's not at this hour. But I think that some of these questions that we're having answers for Toronto will recur when it comes to later into the postseason. Right now, we just got to see and find out if the Toronto Raptors have any answers. And I think we can all unequivocally say that we do not believe that they do. But again, on to Toronto, on to up north. And with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Thank you for joining us. Y'all be safe. We out.